So we've heard a lot of testimony over the past 2 or 3 weeks from many people in our community. Some of us have actually gone and talked to business owners impacted by the Silver Cloud HTH facility. We've, in my mind, I didn't add up all the hours and minutes, but at least collectively, we must have spent at least 5 or 6 hours listening to people, pretty impassioned. And so one of the questions I had for the mayor was, when she had made a comment that we are, it's clear what the interim official control means to the work ahead. And sort of my question was, what is that clarity? And what I was really thinking is, how is council involved in this? Because as we learned by some of the testimony, that this discussion, at least with the city of Redmond, has been going on since January, and council has not been involved until after it was publicly, like a day or so right before it was publicly announced. And we've really not had at all a council discussion. Individually, we may have talked with different people, but we did a lot of listening as a collective body, but we have not had a discussion. So the mayor did respond in an email, and I'm not real clear when I read it, and I've read it a couple of times. I don't see a role for council in any of this unless we decide that there's a role. And that's how she closes this email. Council can weigh in at any time regarding the occupancy agreement. Please work with Council President Padier to set a specific time for such a discussion. When I read the rest of this email, and we all got it, there was a lot of decisions have already been made. And I think we're really failing our community and our public trust in not having a elected representative discussion on this topic. We've received a ton of emails and a lot of testimony, and we only have 1 week before the public hearing. So I think that we've sort of been remiss not to schedule this discussion earlier. I've heard from a number of people and including my neighbor, by the way, who said when she came to the meeting, she was going to testify, and then decided it wasn't worth her time, mostly because of sort of the reaction of council members sitting there with blank looks on their face and not being able to speak to this, and the mayor just trying to control the emotions of the crowd. So, and her point is there's a perception that people don't trust homeless people, but she said that's the wrong idea. What they don't trust is the government, and that's us. And I think that we need to set a time to talk about this. We need to set a time to address this as a body and find out what the council role is in, as Mayor Bernie said, in the content of the occupancy agreement. What kinds of influences, opportunities, conditions, what can council either recommend, or do we have any authority at all? And then the last thing I would want to say on this is in this email from the mayor, she also said that it's premature to talk about the occupancy agreement until a operator is identified and put on contract. And I would think just the opposite, that we should know before the city selects, or before the county or whoever actually is doing it selects an operator, that we should in fact create those requirements for an occupancy agreement. So I appreciate the input from the mayor, but I'm still a little bit lost on how council is involved. I'm still a little bit lost on why we have not addressed this with our public, who is very concerned. And I'm still a little bit lost on what the sequence of events should be. So any help from council leadership or council members or the mayor in addressing this would be really appreciated by me.
Mayor Bernie.
Thank you. So as was described in the email to you and the council and previous emails on this, we are still waiting on the county to put out their RFP to see who might want to run the facility. We have been told that things are a bit delayed due to staffing challenges, and but we still anticipate, we hope that that RFP will go out soon. And then there's a period of time where they keep it open. And then during that time, we'll be working as a city to gather input from our community, which questionnaire will be going out to the community soon, to get their input on what kind of outcomes they'd like to see in this kind of facility. So all of that is in process, and that has been shared with all of the council, as well as community members that have been writing in. And so I would say that's some of the opportunity. As far as the council goes, I'll turn it over to Council President Poirier for those discussions and what role the council wants to have in that, because that's, as you're doing this evening, opportunity to talk about this would be during talk time or other things if you schedule them.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councilmember Fields, for bringing up this issue. This is the first request I've heard from a council member stating that they want to have this discussion. So I appreciate you bringing that up. We are going to have a presentation next week from King County Health Through Housing. I think it might be worth listening to that presentation, and then I can work with Vice President Anderson in the mayor's office to set up a discussion time. But it would be helpful to have some parameters so we know what we would be discussing, given that it's still a lot of stuff that needs to be done with King County before we know what our role is, and I think it's crucial to get that community input so that we know as a council how to proceed. So I'm going to open it up to other council members and see what they have to say. Vice President Anderson.
Thank you, Council President Poirier, and also Mr. Fields for bringing this up, and Madam Mayor for your comments on that and the email as well. I did want to mention that it is challenging to discuss an email without it being presented more publicly. So I do have a specific request if we can. I understand we are getting a presentation next week from the King County Health Through Housing group, and I would really appreciate, and I think so would the community, seeing sort of a TikTok of what has gone on and where we're at in the timeline. If we can understand a little bit about that. The email we did receive was rather long and detailed about who did what and when, and if we could articulate that in a 5-minute, just a summary, I think that would really provide a lot of clarity to see, what to help kind of with the feelings that we're hearing, as well as the general sense of where it's headed. There's a lot of uncertainty and then a lot of concerns that I think would be really helpful to sort of lay out on a map. If we could get that, I think I would really appreciate it. So my big question, and this is the question I'm hearing as well from the community, is what's the plan? Is if this is headed in, is it something that council has control of? And if so, what does that look like? And then in general, what the general deployment plan of it is. I think there's been some dates thrown around, an RFP is coming out. So understanding a timeline on what that looks like would be really, really helpful. So that would be my ask in one of the next meetings in next week, if we can.
Thank you. Mayor Bernie.
Yeah, so the information that's included in the email to council is also on the, we created a webpage solely for this issue. So if people go to our city website, if they scroll down a bit, they'll learn more about King County's Health Through Housing program. And if they click on that, they will get all of that information that the council has been able to see. Also, Director Helland and one of our staff members in communications has worked on just making a little business card with that the web address on it and some other information that's important for the community to hear. So we have been working to get out this information to the community as well. Thank you.
Ms. Forsyth.
Thank you, and thank you to Mr. Fields for bringing this to our attention and raising the question. It's something that's been on my mind heavily. I guess maybe that's my own fault for not bringing it forward sooner, but I assumed that this was something that council leadership would be bringing forward for us to discuss. So I'm a little surprised to hear that this is the first request, since we've been sitting through 2.5 hours of public comment for about 4 regular business meetings now. So clearly it's on all of our minds and on the community's minds, and they deserve for us to be publicly speaking about it and not just having emails that we receive on the topic. My only question that I would add to what Ms. Anderson said as far as what she wants to see, which I completely agree with, would be what sort of input do we as council members have on the RFP process in coordination with the county? I know the ordinance that we are set to have the public hearing on gives us a little more teeth and a little more input into the county's responsibilities. So I would be very curious to know how that input, how we can have maybe a little bit of say on that RFP process.
Mayor Bernie.
This is King County's facility. It is King County's process. It is their RFP. We have no say in the RFP process. We are, through the interim control process, are utilizing the ability that we have to input in who runs the facility, but beyond that, all of the other things are outside of our control as a city. Much of this was legislated to us by the legislature, and so we are taking the opportunity where we can to have control in whoever runs the facility, but outside of that, that is really the only area that we have legal ability to influence. We have been working with the county and talking with them quite a bit. They know our desires for who would run the facility, but that will be their decision in selecting.
So to follow up on that, who are our desires to run the facility? Because that's not something that council has discussed. So I'm curious where that conversation is coming from.
Thank you, council member. So that is a good question. That is our staff that work in this realm of homelessness and housing have been working with King County staff on that and sharing with them extensively what kind of requirements we have as a city and what our values are as a city, so that we hope that the applicants for this will be whoever applies will be contractors that understand how we in the city of Redmond run our already substantial programs in homelessness and housing.
That was a more general who, as in what they embody, versus an entity of like a local nonprofit.
Oh yeah, absolutely, the philosophy. And once again, we're running into the challenge that providers are pretty limited right now in opportunity because of demand and also for a lack of employees. And so we continue to work with the county, but once again, we don't know. They haven't put the RFP yet, and they haven't shared with us, how many they anticipate will apply. They do have I have been told they have a list of pre-approved providers, and we have worked to kind of direct them in ways to make sure that they know the kind of providers that we're interested in. But once again, we're still waiting on them to open up the process.
Okay, and then one more thing that just popped into my mind while we're having this discussion. Have we considered inviting our 2 King County Council representatives that represent Redmond to the table when we have this discussion, because I think that would be very valuable feedback for them to take back as they're developing the RFP, or if those conversations are going on, how council can be involved in that.
I have been working with our council members, and I know Councilmember Claudia Balducci is working with the executive. This is being run through the executive's office, so they have been working together on it. So they're in touch with us. We've been working with them. They know our desires are very clear. And generally speaking, I would say for all of us, what we want is for this to be a successful program.
I think I appreciate all that. I think my ask was for council to be involved in those conversations as well. I know many of us have been individually, but I think for what the community wants to see, they want to see clear transparency and having a conversation. If we can invite them, I know they're very busy, but if we could invite them to an open forum like this, I think that would be beneficial to rebuild and restore some of that trust that the community has been saying that they've lost. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, I just had a question. Was there talk of having a neighborhood conversation later on this issue, and maybe that would be an opportunity to invite those King County Council members?
I do know that Councilmember Balducci already had one of those. That has not been on our list, in part because we are limited in the influence that we have in running this program. I think that, like I said, Claudia Balducci did have one, and I think that really, because the program is King County, it really rests with them.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Forsyth, for bringing that suggestion. Ms. Kritzer.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the conversation. I think, from my perspective, I would welcome the opportunity for us to have some time after the King County, when we do the public hearing, if we have the presentation from the King County staff, and then we're able to also hear from the public. I assume that they'll share some more ideas. But especially if we could frame it before we actually take the public comments during that hearing, to just let them know, some of these pieces in particular around that there is an opportunity for us to influence the operator, as well as you mentioned in your email to us, much discussed tonight, that there will be a good neighbor agreement that's developed, and we want to get their ideas on it. It would be great after, so that if any members of the public wanted to share their thoughts, and because I think one of the piece of feedback I've heard a lot is that's a request, and since it's actually happening, it would be great to let people know that, and to say really, then to take what we're hearing and make sure that they know that it will be conveyed back as part of this process, and that's part of what we are able to do. And so I think just thinking about what does that facility look like, and where we are able to influence it. And then I think, as usually happens when we have a public hearing, we often have a public hearing and then we have a council discussion afterwards. I don't know, or do we only do that when we vote on something? Yeah, I'll let the mayor jump in for a sec. She's looking at me.
If I might, Council President. This is the hearing on the interim official control, which you have already voted on. There is no action taken at this meeting. But what does happen, and I might call on Director Helen if I get this wrong, she might clarify. But this issue does go to the Planning Commission for them to do the permanent changes. But right now, this is because of the changes that the legislature made. We needed to do this, and we wanted to make sure we acted prior to this facility so that we could have a say in the provider. But this once again is just an interim control, and the final version will go through the Planning Commission, and they will be working on this. So the opportunity to share with the public what this is and what this isn't, I guess, is good for them to know. And we'll have an introduction about the hearing, but also the information about having a questionnaire going out to the public. We've been sharing that, and we hope to have that ready soon to go out to them so they'll know they can look for that. And what we'll be asking from the community is, what kind of outcomes would you like to see in this facility? So we can really focus on what are the desires of our community.
Great. So I guess a question in terms of the process for next week, though. Will we be able to Q&A with the King County representatives that are coming?
Yes, it will be Leo Floor and Mark Ellebrook who are running this program throughout the county, and they have a short presentation to share to give how this program came into being, what it is, what it isn't, show countywide what's going on, and then the council will have an opportunity to ask them questions.
Okay, and then we'll have the hearing from the public.
The hearing will be later in the meeting.
Okay, that's going to be earlier in the evening. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so they will present just like the Regional Homeless Authority presenters presented during the special orders of the day, so that they can present and council can ask questions, and then we have the rest of our meeting.
Understood. Thank you. Well, in that case, I would say I think it'll be great to do the Q&A next week. I guess I would support us all scheduling perhaps some study session time in the near future to have more discussion about this topic. I think especially if we are going to be going out to our community with a survey, maybe we could look at those results. We could also discuss what we're hearing, from different community members, both via email and in person, in terms of feedback, and dig a little more into the details of where we do have influence in this process, what we can do. And then I'd say the other thing that we haven't discussed that much that I would love to dig into a little more is I guess two things. One is in terms of the plan once it launches, of the things that are in our control, which is, for example, the services and support that we provide in the area, the feedback loop we might create to be able to just check in with businesses or residents. Because I think what I'm hearing of concern is that this will go in and what will the city be doing? And I think we have our homeless outreach program, and we have a really amazing human services staff and really amazing public safety staff that if there's need and then we can provide additional services in the area if there's that need. And I think just letting the public know that and kind of talking about what we think that plan should look like would be really great. And then I would say the other thing I would love to see on a discussion about this is there's a lot of misinformation about this project out there right now. And just as a council, I think it'd be really nice for us in a study session to discuss what we all can do to be able to share accurate information about the project and really help to make it a success, because I think there's an opportunity for us to do this in a way that shows a model of what it looks like to house people who don't have housing, and to help them get back off their feet and into the workforce and really exit poverty, because that's the goal. And I think we can do this in a way that is embraced by our community if we think about this together.
Mayor Bernie?
Two follow-ups. One, the council members that were in the meeting tonight received these cards from Director Helen, and those other council members will get them in their boxes. But these have all of that information on it, and so you're interested in making sure that we're giving out the correct information to the community. This is a great way to do that. So I encourage council members to use this as a tool for them to make sure that people are getting accurate information. So that's one. Two, we have on your extended agenda something called Redmond's Thrive program on October 26th. And that goes exactly to this whole bigger picture of how Redmond handles a lot of the challenges that we face in our community and our community members face. So we pulled together our homeless outreach coordinator, our mobile integrated health, Susie Kroll from the police department, and some other community court and some other things that we do as a city that really goes to helping people in our community who are struggling in one way or another, and pulls that all together. So my suggestion for council, I think that really dovetails nicely into this conversation about health through housing, what our Thrive program is, and then how this is a philosophy of how we in the city of Redmond serve the community members and what that looks like for people. A lot of these parts of the Thrive program came out of the 2015 work that we convened with our community on how does Redmond want to handle homelessness and those challenges, and all of these things stem from that. So that's when I share with the county and our county council members and the community. How does Redmond handle homelessness and the challenges? We actually have a pretty excellent track record in the city, and we want to make sure that continues in this program coming to us, the Health Through Housing program.
Thank you, Mayor Bernie, and thank you, Councilmember Kritzer. I can work with council leadership to see how we can incorporate these concerns and kind of build in that discussion time with the Redmond Thrive program. And we also have that opportunity next week to do the Q&A with the King County Health Through Housing program folks that are going to be here, and I can try to reach out to Claudia Balducci and Kathy Lambert as well, and I will work with Vice President Anderson and the mayor. Continuing on, Councilmember Carson.
Thank you. I was just going to mention the website because it hasn't been mentioned yet. It's redmond.gov/HTH, Health Through Housing, HTH.
Thank you for sharing that. Councilmember Fields.
Yeah, thanks. So there's a couple of things where I think the point is being missed. The first thing I would say, in general, people expect a city council elected representatives to be part of the discussion. So when I hear the discussions that the planning department will make this decision and we, meaning the mayor's office instead of the city, because it's not included the council, we have made our desires known to King County. I can tell you for a fact that I, as part of the city government, have not had any input into whatever we is. So that's very disturbing to me that, we have this structured government where there are 8 elected officials, and it feels to me like the mayor's belief potentially is that there should be no advise and consent role on a topic like this. And I find that really distressing because this is an important issue, and whether we have any legal authority or not, we should at least have input. We all talk to the community. We are elected as representatives. Your surveys and all of those other things are extremely useful tools, but they are helped and assisted by talking to city council members who, in fact, live and meet with people in the community on a daily basis. So I wouldn't look at council as some other source of information. It's a combined source of information. And then that being said, the interim control agreement was in fact a council ordinance that was requested by the mayor's office, and we were told that it strengthened the city's role in working with King County, and that is in fact why I voted for it. So I would also make the point, and maybe at some point I would like to have a conversation with Jim Haney, because there's a lot of people who have written into the council and to the mayor with the viewpoint that our director of planning sort of deceived us. And I very much have defended that, no, that is not the case. There was no deception. We were, in fact, trying to strengthen the hand of city government, which includes council, to work with King County and making sure that this program is successful and that we let them know and assert whatever authority we have in making sure that all of our community is safe, and that this program does in fact help those who need help with homeless, the challenge of being homeless, and then finding them a place to live so that they can improve the position in their lives. Those are all great things. I'm all for that. But this, the way this has been handled and the secrecy of it, I'm with those people who are frustrated with Redmond City government because that is what's adding to the distrust. So if we need to modify that interim ordinance in order to reassert our role as city council members, then I would like to look into that and maybe make that motion, because what I've heard tonight is actually very distressing.
Mayor Bernie?
I am concerned, Mr. Councilmember Fields. I would say that in no way, shape, or form was any of this effort to challenge the council and not being part of this. We have been working as a city to create an opportunity for the whole city to have a say in this process, and that is exactly what the interim official control does. It is why we're reaching out to the community. It is why we're bringing this presentation from King County to the council. It is why I've been working with council leadership to make sure we have opportunities to hear about what's going on in the city. So I guess my ask to you, council members, is to make sure that we put this on the agenda so that you have an opportunity to talk about it. I would say, yeah, that's all I'll say.
Thank you, Mayor Bernie, and thank you, Mr. Fields. Councilmember Carson.
Thank you. So I think given the constraints that the legislature has put on cities, that it basically has taken away local control of issues like this, we find ourselves in a situation where also another governmental entity, the county, has decided to put this facility here, or to purchase a facility that they can enact this program here. These things are very much out of our control. The only thing we have to hang our hat on is the choice of the operator, and that's where I've been focusing my time to see if we can get someone who will make this a success, because I do believe that's what we all want. We want to see people who want help get help. And so that's, I think, the only thing we can do at this point. And I know that Mr. Fields has been out talking to people, and I think that's, absolutely we should be engaging. The problem is we don't really have any solutions until we get to picking an operator. And I think coming together on values that we want to see in an operator is going to be key. And I think we all agree that the way we handle homelessness in Redmond by the folks that like Tiza Rutherford and Kent Hay before her, we are trying to help those who want help. Those who don't want help, those who want this to be a lifestyle, they can't be helped in this kind of program. So, I empathize completely with Mr. Fields on just how this has been handed to us, but it's largely out of our control. The only thing we can do now is pick a good operator, and that's what I'm hoping to help facilitate.
Thank you, Mr. Carson. Ms. Kritzer?
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate what you just said, Mr. Carson. I think I concur on that, and I do think, if there is a feeling of urgency that we want to be able to discuss and give input to the mayor and the city staff that are having a lot of these discussions sooner, then I say let's schedule that sooner. I don't think there's any need to amend the ordinance itself. Since from what I understand, and I'd also just like to say thank you to our planning director, and to affirm that I appreciate that she has given us quite a lot of information on this and has been very upfront and straightforward. And I don't really appreciate repeating negative things that have been said that frankly aren't true. So I just wanted to be able to say that, and that I look forward to us having this discussion as urgently as we need to in order to make sure that we have each of us shared our thoughts and feedback on what we would like to see in the operation of this facility and the Good Neighbor Agreement. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Kritzer and Mr. Carson. I would agree with you. One idea off the top of my head is if we could individually try to articulate what those asks and inputs are, and maybe we could make time if the Parks and Human Services Chair is amenable to have that discussion time at her committee and maybe put together a statement or some guidelines that we would like to recommend as a council. And then we send it to the mayor's office in King County, and then focus on getting that community input and helping with finding the optimal operator or provider for the Health Through Housing site. So just throwing that out there, and I will continue on. Councilmember Forsyth.
Thank you, Council President Page. I think that you just kind of hit on something that I think we were all hoping that we would be doing at this point, was pulling together that list of what we as a council want to see. So I hope that you will spearhead that work for us to do in these upcoming conversations that we're going to have. I think that's a great idea, and I fully support that idea. If I could, I just wanted to ask a question through the chair to Councilmember Carson. When he referenced focusing his time on selecting on the partner, can he elaborate on that? Because I know many of us have connections within these kinds of groups that have run successful facilities like this, and I think that's where I'm missing part of this context, is knowing how we as council members can show up for that part of the conversation. I would love to reach out to some of my contacts personally that I have for projects that are very similar to this, but I'm not confident that that is where we're at in this part of the process. So I'm looking for some guidance on that.
Would someone like to respond, Mr. Carson?
I would love to. Yeah. I mean, all I'm doing is taking what I know of, as you have mentioned, you have folks that are in this space, and I've encouraged them to submit an RFQ if it's reissued. I think they didn't get very many responses to the initial one, so it may be going out again. It's a little bit in flux. So, but really taking what I know of the organizations that I'm that I'm very familiar with, and encouraging them to participate, to think about doing this if they weren't, because frankly, I think that some competition in this area will give us, the best outcome, the best provider, if we have, a lot of different organizations looking at doing it. One, I think, will mesh with the kind of values that we're looking to instill in or have a provider exhibit. So that's basically what I'm doing, is just encouraging them to consider submitting an RFQ when the opportunity arises.
Thank you. You'd mentioned that there was one that already went out. Is that true? Because I thought we just heard that it hadn't gone out yet.
I'm going to let Mayor respond to that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That is not the information I've gotten. So my understanding is that they haven't pushed this out for the Silver Cloud in Redmond yet. What they have done is a while ago, they have director Helen, I can't think of the right term. Pre-approved, I guess, would be the right thing, of pre-qualified providers, but for the general process of Health Through Housing, but they haven't gone out to bid yet for this particular hotel, this particular
Okay.
facility. So
So
that
there's-
is my understanding. I just checked with people today, so that is my understanding. So I'm going to guess there's some semantic challenges involved in who is pre-approved for generally speaking, but there's been nothing yet for this facility yet.
Okay, that was my understanding too, that there was no RFQ, RFP that had gone out. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to clarify from the prior.
That is my
Councilmember
understanding as
comment.
well. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Next, we have Vice President Anderson.
Thank you. Sure. I have a couple of questions that I just wanted to add as I was listening to this conversation, and I appreciate some of the detailed questions and kind of the direction this is headed. So I wanted to make sure I get these on the table. One thing I'm a little concerned about is the tendency of council to talk in circles about something that may or may not be our decision ultimately. And so my question, a very specific question, is when is the program services agreement likely to be in front of the council? It does sound that we have we understand that is something that will be our role to provide input. Do we know what's the time frame of that?
Mayor Bernie?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say we don't know yet, in part because we don't know, they haven't asked for they haven't put out the RFP yet. They haven't gotten the providers offering for the services yet. We hopefully when Mark and Leo come on Tuesday, they'll give us more detailed information, but we're still waiting on all of that. So yes, that's out there. When, don't know yet. Okay. Initially when they shared that they purchased this facility, they said, we want to open it as soon as possible before fall. And I remember looking at them going, that is not going to happen. It's just there's just no way. And now they're looking at possibly January. So we'll see, kind of dependent on when they get the RFP out, who applies, how long that takes, how long it takes to get the agreement starting to look at, and then we'll have some more details. So also not, as soon as we know, we will share with all of you and the community.
Okay, that's great. So that gives me, when we talked about addressing something with a sense of urgency, something 4 months out doesn't sound super urgent to me. So I think it's important to make sure that we're thinking about, what is the issue that's at hand, and making sure that we focus any conversation we have about that. So that would just be, make sure we spend our precious time for council, making sure we address the community's feelings and thoughts, of course, as well as making sure our conversations are super focused around what needs done at what time, so that we can be most effective. And a couple other things I think I'd like to just get on the table. Something that we probably ought to talk about, perhaps at a talk time, is how did this happen in the background without us knowing? I think that's a really important piece. I think there was a request, and maybe we can talk about our communication between council and the mayor's office for future things that happen, in terms of not being notified a day before, but also being at least apprised of the process and understanding if it's supposed to be confidential or not. I think that would be really helpful. Beyond that, and I'm not sure if it's a process issue that we could talk about in our rules of procedure or whatever that looks like. But ultimately, one other concern I have is the longer this extends, one thing I actually really enjoy hearing from the community at our items from the audience, but a concern I do have is how can we avoid being an accidental conduit for misinformation and disinformation if that comes up. I think that's a worthwhile conversation to have at a talk time or something, and maybe in the future couple meetings. If we continue to get that, we need to be given the tools to make sure we correct that or focus the energy and make sure everything's factual and we're not being at least broadcasting something that is fundamentally not factual. I think that's really important. So that would be I think I said 3 things and those were the 3. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fields.
So Councilmember Anderson asked the question that I was going to ask, but I need to clarify the answer. Before I ask that question again, I want to say that also I agree completely with Councilmember Anderson and others that what is urgent is that we regain the trust of the community. And the issue of misinformation is exactly right, but there's also information out there from the community that in fact is real, because that is what they're thinking. And we need to understand what they're thinking and help them and inform them and educate them. The question I have is and on the RFP, and the way Councilmember Anderson asked the question is, when would it come before council? And what I had heard prior to the answer from the mayor saying she didn't know is that my understanding is it wouldn't come before council, and that the only thing that we could do is make a statement, or as Councilmember Carson is doing, go out and encourage people to bid on it. So I guess I'm looking for some clarity here. Is in fact the operator's agreement going to come to council at some point? And if it is, then I believe pretty firmly that we should have an input into the drafting of that agreement before it is sent out to potential operators.